The yellow light of the early evening filtered through the worn curtains of the family kitchen, casting long, familiar shadows across the faded linoleum floor. It was a space that had witnessed 1,000 arguments, a million laughter-filled dinners, and the slow, relentless passage of decades. Dan Conner sat heavily at the sturdy wooden kitchen table, his large workman hands wrapped tightly around a warm mug of black coffee, watching the domestic storm brewing right in front of his eyes. Roseanne was leaning casually against the kitchen counter, having just dropped a heavy plastic bag of groceries onto the counter with a loud thud, while Aunt Jackie paced back and forth near the stove with an expression of intense, frantic energy. "Thanks for letting Beverly play cards with us tonight, guys," Roseanne said, her voice dripping with her signature dry irony as she looked across the room. "I am honestly not entirely sure who you think you are talking to, because the truth is that we definitely did not want her here in the first place." Beverly, who was sitting gracefully at the opposite end of the dining table, adjusted her knitted blue sweater with an air of complete and total innocence. She smoothed down her skirt, entirely unbothered by her daughter's biting tone. "I would have been perfectly fine staying at my own apartment tonight, Roseanne," Beverly noted with a light, airy sigh that managed to sound both fragile and profoundly passive-aggressive. "However, Jackie insists that she does not trust me there by myself anymore." Jackie stopped her frantic pacing mid-step, her hands instantly flying up into the air as her eyes widened in absolute disbelief. "Mom, I went out of the house for less than 15 minutes to do a simple task," Jackie shouted, her voice climbing to a sharp octave. "I went to check the mail at the corner box, and by the time I pulled back into the driveway, you had already managed to pull up half the carpeting in my master bedroom. Why on earth would you do that to a perfectly fine house?" Beverly smiled with calm satisfaction, smoothing out a wrinkle in her sleeve. "Some of these older apartment buildings in town have truly beautiful hardwood floors hidden beneath the surface, dear. I was merely trying to help you discover the hidden value and craftsmanship of your property. Do not dare try to blame me or my house just because your own apartment did not have anything beautiful underneath the surface," Roseanne chimed in, crossing her arms tightly and leaning back against the refrigerator door. "You cannot just go around destroying other people's floorboards just because you have an interior design itch, Mom." "Check," Beverly said suddenly, making a distinct tapping motion on the wood of the table as if finalizing a magnificent, undeniable move on an imaginary chessboard. "Yeah, if you are clever and resourceful enough, you can easily roll up an old winter blanket and put your entire body into a carpet to understand the true layout and spatial flow of a room. It is a matter of understanding design." Roseanne rolled her eyes so hard it looked physically exhausting. "Well, thank you for that wonderful piece of advice, Mom. That is just something incredibly strange to put into your pocket for later, I suppose." The heavy back door suddenly rattled on its hinges and clicked open, introducing Darlene into the cramped room. She looked completely worn out from the evening rush, her dark hair tangled from the windy autumn air outside, and her shoulders slumped heavily under the weight of her massive canvas work tote bag. She walked over to the nearest wooden chair and dropped the bag onto the seat with a hollow, echoing thud. "You managed to get stuck in that bad highway traffic again, Darlene?" Roseanne asked, turning her sharp, critical gaze toward her daughter as she walked to the stove. "You are getting home later and later every single night this week. It is starting to become a trend." "Yeah, I was stuck on that miserable Dan Ryan expressway forever," Darlene muttered, rubbing the bridge of her nose to chase away an impending tension headache. "I know that we originally built that massive expressway to honor a truly great man, but all anybody in this city ever actually says is that they were stuck on the stupid expressway. It is a monument to human frustration and gridlock. Did the kids at least get some dinner tonight?" Roseanne gestured vaguely with her hand toward the living room where the television was murmuring softly. "They managed to find some cereal and leftover food for themselves. They certainly did not bother to make me anything to eat." Jackie suddenly stopped her pacing near the doorway and began aggressively patting down the side cushions of the worn floral armchair near the television set. "Hey, Darlene, I think Harris might have lost one of her good earrings deep inside the cracks of the couch earlier today. Can you give me a hand looking for it before it disappears into the springs forever?" Darlene frowned, walking slowly over to the living room archway with a suspicious look on her face. I did not even know that Harris possessed any good earrings. Since when does she own fine jewelry? She does not own anything valuable, Jackie whispered loudly, leaning in so close that her forehead almost brushed Darlene's shoulder as she pretended to search the furniture. Her ears are constantly infected because she buys all her jewelry from the discount bin at the mall. I just said that because I absolutely had to talk to somebody right now. I am going completely crazy in this house, Darlene. My mind is spinning. Darlene sighed deeply and knelt down on the carpet, shoving her right arm deep between the dusty cushions to maintain the visual illusion for the rest of the family in the kitchen. Oh, wonderful. Let us pretend that we are searching through the old couch for lost treasure. What is wrong now, Jackie? Did Mom rearrange your medicine cabinet alphabetically? I was not actually stuck on the expressway traffic tonight, Darlene, Jackie confessed, her voice dropping to an intense, frantic whisper that barely carried over the sound of the television. I lied to your father about the Dan Ryan Expressway. Well, why on earth would you lie to your dad about something like that? Darlene asked, looking at her aunt with genuine confusion. You and David see each other all the time to handle things for the children. It is not a secret from anyone in this family. We see each other because of the kids. Yes, I know that, Jackie said, her eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and absolute panic. But today was different, Darlene. Today we were sitting in his parked car down by the park, and we were making out like a pair of high school juniors. I cannot exactly tell my father that I was making out with my former husband while I am also actively dating Ben. It does not make for good dinner conversation. Darlene stopped moving her hand inside the couch cushions and stared at her aunt. You and David? When exactly did this situation start happening again? It has been happening over the last couple of months, Jackie admitted, her face flushing a deep shade of pink. We just started talking about the past and our old relationship to see if we could somehow make it work again for the sake of the family stability. And then tonight, we completely stopped talking because our tongues were suddenly in each other's mouths. It just happened so fast, and before I knew it, we were kissing. But I thought you and Ben were doing absolutely great together, Darlene said, shaking her head in confusion. You told me last week that he was the most stable, wonderful man you had ever met in your entire life. We are doing great, Jackie said, sounding deeply conflicted and running a hand through her hair. Ben is absolutely incredible to me. But, you know, I still have these massive, unresolved feelings for David. And if there is even a small chance that I can put my family back together under one roof, I have to try, right? Is that not what a responsible person does? Darlene looked at her grimly, her sarcastic defense mechanisms clicking back into place. If you want to do that, you have to give up Ben immediately. You cannot keep both of them on a string, Jackie. Why would I do that so quickly? Jackie asked, her voice rising in defensive panic. Ben and I are amazing together. He makes me feel safe and secure. David makes me feel alive and spontaneous. Oh, it is the classic wanting of the cake followed closely by the ever-present eating of it, too, Darlene said, leaning back on her heels and shaking her head. You are running an incredibly dangerous game, Aunt Jackie. How are you even finding the hours in the day for all this romance? You are a working woman. I do not have the time, Jackie groaned, burying her face in her hands. I am, this close to completely losing my mind and my schedule. When I am supposed to be spending time with David, I am with Ben. When I am supposed to be with Ben, I am running off to meet David. When I am supposed to be with the kids, I am with Ben or David. It is a logistical nightmare of epic proportions. Darlene pointed a finger at her aunt's face. You know what this means, right? You are right on the verge of having physical relations with both of them in the same 24-hour period. No way, Jackie said, shaking her head violently. I cannot go any further with David while I am still seeing Ben. I absolutely cannot sleep with two guys at the same time. I am simply not that kind of person. I have moral boundaries and standards. Darlene let out a short, cynical laugh that echoed through the small living room. Let me tell you something, Aunt Jackie. I have been that exact person before in my younger, wilder days, and let me assure you, it can be an absolute nightmare. A fantastic, thrilling, emotional nightmare, but a nightmare nonetheless. Before Jackie could respond to the comment, the front door opened and 12-year-old Kira bounced into the house, her high ponytail swinging side to side with boundless energy. Her mustard yellow adventurer jacket was unzipped, revealing her favorite cherry red bandana tied neatly around her neck. She was followed closely by Becky, who was heavily pregnant and moving with the slow, awkward waddle of someone carrying 20 extra pounds of human life. "Hey, guys," Kira called out cheerfully, kicking her sneakers off near the door with an enthusiastic smile. "Look who I found walking up the driveway looking like a glorious parade float." "Hey, crazy back," Roseanne called out from the kitchen, her tone shifting to one of affectionate teasing as she watched her eldest daughter enter the room. "Hey, little mama," Dan added, his face lighting up with a warm smile as he stood up from the wooden kitchen table. "Wow, Becky, you are getting incredibly big since last Tuesday. Is that baby moving around in there yet?" "Not yet," Becky said, sighing deeply as she leaned against the doorframe to catch her breath and support her lower back. "But she is definitely watching the local newspapers for a younger uterus in a much better neighborhood. This place is getting entirely too crowded for her taste." "What is up?" Darlene asked, standing up from the floor and abandoning the fake earrings search entirely. "You look like you have a specific mission tonight, Becky." "Aunt Jackie asked me to come by tonight to go over a birth plan she made for me," Becky said, holding up a massive, thick white binder that looked like a Supreme Court legal encyclopedia. "I was honestly expecting a page or two of basic suggestions and notes. Instead, I got the encyclopedia in Seneca. It has color-coded tabs, Darlene. It is terrifying." Roseanne snorted from the kitchen counter, taking a sip of her water. "Aunt Jackie is just looking for absolutely anything to give some semblance of meaning to her life. Becky, you just happened to be standing in the station when the crazy train pulled into town. Tag, you are it." Jackie looked deeply offended, crossing her arms tightly over her chest and glaring at her sister. "I am just trying to be helpful and supportive. A birth is a monumental spiritual event that requires extensive preparation and care. I am cashing out," Beverly announced suddenly from the dining room table, where she had been quietly playing a solitary game of cards. "No way am I staying here to listen to this extensive medical lecture." "No way," Roseanne shouted back across the room. "I have been losing to her at Rummy all night long, and now she wants to leave just because things are getting complicated? It is a total win for the rest of us if she walks out that front door right now." "Did you actually read my birth plan, Becky?" Jackie asked, stepping forward and ignoring Roseanne entirely. "I spent 3 whole days researching the optimal environmental conditions for labor." "I tried, Jackie, I really tried," Becky said, dropping the heavy white binder onto the coffee table with a loud, echoey thud. "It is just far too much information for me to process right now. Can we please just go over this later? I am not even due for another 2 months. We have plenty of time." "But everything in here is absolutely important," Jackie insisted, opening the binder and pointing frantically at a highlighted yellow section. "Having soft, dimmed lights and calming classical music playing in the background is crucial for the environment. And putting the baby directly on your chest immediately after delivery ensures there is a massive surge of oxytocin, so she bonds to you instantly. I even have a whole chapter dedicated entirely to infant car seats and the proper angles of installation." Beverly walked past them toward the kitchen sink, shaking her head with an old-fashioned sigh. "I just do not know what all the fuss is about these days. In my day, we simply wrapped the baby in a paper napkin and took it home in our purse. Nobody needed a binder or soft music." "Mom," Roseanne said, looking at her mother with deadpan seriousness, "you are confusing the birth of your children with stealing muffins from a local restaurant. Those are 2 entirely different legal and moral matters." "Fine," Beverly said, sniffing the air with an attitude of elegance. "So that is where all the clean glasses are hiding. Yesterday I had to drink my morning milk out of a tiny shot glass because this house is run like a chaotic logging camp." Harris walked down the stairs at that exact moment, her phone glued to her hand, her expression one of permanent teenage boredom and mild annoyance. "Sorry," she muttered, looking around the crowded, noisy room. "I try not to come down here if I can avoid it. It is like using a public bathroom at the mall. I just want to get in, get out as fast as possible, and absolutely not make eye contact with any of the residents." "Harris," Roseanne said sharply, pointing a finger, "you should be a part of this conversation. One day you might have a baby of your own. You will want to know this stuff so you do not repeat our mistakes." "Pass," Harris said, not looking up from her bright phone screen. "I am definitely not having any kids. Ever." "And why not?" Beverly asked, her voice cracking slightly with old-fashioned disapproval as she looked at her great-granddaughter. Why would a young girl say such a strange thing? It is a completely different time, Nana, Harris said, finally looking up from her phone and rolling her eyes. You do not have to have a bunch of kids to give your life meaning anymore. Women actually have careers and independent lives now. Good luck getting a decent man to marry you with that kind of attitude, Beverly shot back, crossing her arms tightly. Men want a family, not a corporate lecture from their spouse. Becky suddenly gasped, her face going entirely pale in an instant. She dropped her car keys onto the floor, her hands flying to her stomach. Crap, she whispered, her voice trembling with sudden fear. I think I just peed myself. It is not stopping. Jackie looked down at the floor, her medical training and instinct instantly kicking in. Becky, I think your water just broke. Oh no, Becky groaned, her knees shaking as she gripped the back of the floral couch for support. No, 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 no. This cannot be happening right now. It is too early. Oh, really, Becky? Beverly said, looking at her granddaughter with a disappointed shake of her head. It is much too soon for this. You never fail to disappoint with your timing. Dan sprang into action, his heavy boots thudding loudly against the linoleum as he grabbed his truck keys from the peg by the door. Dan, Dan, Roseanne yelled, her voice echoing through the entire house. We are heading to the hospital right now. Becky's water broke. Damn, Dan said, his face setting into a mask of pure determination and focus. I will drive the truck. Let us go right now. Move it, people. This isn't happening, Becky whimpered as Darlene and Jackie guided her carefully toward the front door. I still have 2 more months to live my life before this child arrives. I am not ready for this. Harris, we do not have time for you to stand there staring, Roseanne ordered as she pushed past her granddaughter to grab her coat. Clean that mess up off the floor, would you? Harris looked down at the puddle on the linoleum with absolute disgust. This is exactly why I do not come down here, she muttered to herself as the heavy front door slammed shut behind them. This place is a circus. The waiting room of the county hospital was dimly lit and smelled strongly of industrial bleach and stale coffee. A large sign near the entrance proudly stated that the family documentary was recorded in front of a live studio audience, a quirky remnant of a local television piece that had once featured the town, but tonight, the atmosphere was entirely devoid of comedy or entertainment. Oh, Becky groaned, clutching the arms of the uncomfortable vinyl waiting room chair as she rocked back and forth. The contractions are getting significantly closer together, Darlene. Why aren't they taking me into a room? We have to stop this immediately. Dad is currently getting a nurse, Darlene said, kneeling in front of her sister and rubbing her cold hands to keep them warm. As soon as he gets one of them to pay attention, they're going to give you something to stop the contractions completely. The doctors can do wonders with medication these days. And until they get here, Jackie announced, stepping into Becky's line of sight with a look of intense focus, we are going to do some advanced visualization exercises to stay completely calm and centered. We need to send a clear message to the womb. So, the baby does not want to come out yet. The baby is perfectly happy exactly where it is. Visualize a peaceful, locked door. The baby is moving, Becky screamed, her face twisting in pain as she gripped Darlene's shoulder with immense strength. The baby is moving like crazy in there, Jackie. That visualization isn't working at all. It is doing the exact opposite. Okay, well, then we will. We will just talk directly to the baby, Jackie said, her voice dropping an octave as she leaned toward Becky's stomach. Sweetheart, hi. It is your Aunt Jackie and your mommy talking to you. And we just want you to know that there is absolutely no rush to enter the world. There is literally no money saved for your college tuition anyway. And, your daddy has been deported back to Mexico. And there is a significant amount of alcohol addiction in your genetic background. So just stay put. You are completely freaking the baby out, Darlene shouted, shoving Jackie away from her sister with an annoyed glare. Next idea, please, before you cause a psychological crisis before birth. At the reception desk, Dan was slamming his massive palm against the counter, his patience entirely exhausted by the bureaucratic red tape. Are you experiencing chest pains, a sudden rash, or immediate breathing issues? The nurse behind the desk asked, her voice completely monotone as she stared at her computer screen without making eye contact. All of those things, lady, but it is not for me, Dan barked, pointing a thick finger over his shoulder at Becky. My daughter has been sitting in that plastic chair for 30 minutes. Her water broke, but the baby is not due for another 2 months. She needs a doctor right this second. Have her fill this paperwork out completely, the nurse said, sliding a thick clipboard across the counter without looking up. We will get to her as fast as we possibly can. We have a full house tonight. No, Dan said, his voice dropping to a dangerous rumble as he pushed the clipboard back across the desk. You take her into a room right now, and I will sit here and fill out your precious forms while she is in there being treated. I want somebody with a medical degree to see her now. Forms first, medical care second, the nurse replied, her tone hardening. That is the hospital protocol, sir. How about I just will her back there myself? Dan suggested, leaning over the counter until he was inches from the nurse's face. And you try and stop me with your little pen. The nurse looked at Dan's massive shoulders, swallowed hard, and immediately hit a button on her intercom. Orderly, please take the geriatric pregnancy into a room immediately, she said quickly. Geriatric? Jackie shrieked from across the room, her hand flying to her chest in absolute outrage. You are so incredibly lucky that I cannot get up and come over there right now, lady, because if I did, this baby would fall out of my sister and I would throw it at you. Meanwhile, back at the local publishing office where Darlene worked part-time, Ben was sitting at his desk surrounded by stacks of paper. The door opened, and Darlene walked in, looking like she had not slept in a week. Hey, Ben said, his face softening with immediate concern as he stood up from his chair. You didn't have to come into the office today, Darlene. You were at the hospital all night long with your family. Oh, I missed you. I missed you, too, Darlene said, letting him pull her into a brief, comforting hug before she collapsed into her own office chair. How is Becky doing? Ben asked, leaning against the edge of her desk. Are things stable? They are still waiting to see if the medication will stop the contractions completely, Darlene explained, rubbing her temples. My dad and Jackie are still over there keeping watch in the waiting room. But actually, I looked over some of the final page proofs in the waiting room last night. There is a noticeable typo in the final proofs. Ben smiled gently, shaking his head. My work does not have typos, Darlene. I checked it twice. Oh, could you do me a huge favor, Ben? Darlene asked, suddenly looking very nervous as she shifted some papers around on her desk. Could you run down to the coffee shop on the corner and get me another large cup of coffee with agave? I really need the caffeine. Ben raised an eyebrow, an amused smile playing on his lips. And on the off chance that cup of mud does not have exotic agave available, is there another exotic plant substance that you will accept as a substitute? Yes, Darlene said without missing a beat. I will gladly take black tar heroin. Whichever one is easier for the barista to find. Got it, Ben laughed, grabbing his jacket from the back of his chair. Oh, good. I will be back in 10 minutes. The moment the door closed behind Ben, Darlene's phone began to buzz furiously on her desk. She snatched it up, her heart hammering against her ribs. Hey, David, she whispered, looking toward the door. I am currently at work. What is up? She listened for a moment, her expression softening into something guilt-ridden and tender. Yeah, that would be really sweet of you, David. I will come by your place and pick you up in 30 minutes, and then we can both go over to the hospital together to see how Becky is doing. Okay, love you too. Bye. She hung up the phone and let out a long, shaky breath, burying her face in her hands. Daddy? She muttered to herself, mocking her own tone. I have never heard you call your dad Daddy before in your entire adult life, Darlene. What is wrong with you? The door clicked open, and Ben walked back in, holding his car keys. Oh, Darlene said, jumping slightly in her seat. You are back quickly. I just forgot my wallet on the back desk, Ben explained, walking past her to retrieve it. I cannot buy your agave coffee without money. Oh, you know what, Ben? Darlene said quickly, waving her hands. I do not actually need another cup of coffee right now. I am already vibrating from the 3 cups I had this morning. Save your money. Ben stopped and looked at her closely, his expression turning serious. All right, I gotta be honest with you, Darlene. I am really worried about you right now. You look completely exhausted. Yeah, it is that stupid expressway traffic, Darlene lied, looking away from his searching gaze. That is the main problem. The traffic is draining my soul. Oh, we both know what the actual solution to that problem is, Ben said, stepping closer and taking her hands in his. You need to move in with me permanently. You know those big real estate signs that say if you lived here, you would be home and having sex with Ben by now. Well, if you moved in, you would be home and having sex with Ben by now. It is a proven fact. Darlene offered a weak, strained smile. I love you. You know that, Ben, but I just really cannot think about making huge life decisions like this right now with everything going on with Becky. Okay, Ben said gently, kissing her forehead. Tabled for another time. I understand. But at least let me just drive you back to the hospital right now, so I can keep you company in the waiting room. No, you know what? That is so incredibly sweet of you, Ben, Darlene said, her voice rising slightly in panic as she thought of David waiting for her. But it is just far too many people at the hospital right now. When you are expecting a premature baby, they give you a much smaller room. There is barely enough oxygen for the family as it is. Go back to work, I will handle it. Back at the Conner house, the kitchen was quiet for the first time all day. Leo was still working on his laptop, his brow furrowed as he typed out a line of code, while Kira sat on the counter, swinging her legs and sharing a sandwich with Gizmo, who took small, polite bites from her hand. The back door opened, and Darlene walked in, her movements frantic as she began tossing random items into a canvas tote bag. How is Aunt Becky doing? Kira asked, hopping down from the counter and wiping her hands on her adventurer jacket. Is the baby coming? Oh, pretty much the exact same as before, Darlene said, not looking up as she grabbed a clean receiving blanket from the laundry basket. I'm just going to grab some clean clothes and personal stuff for her and run right back to the hospital before she notices I left. Okay, Kira said, pointing to a plastic bowl on the table. Do you want me to save you some of this fresh kale salad I made for dinner? Darlene stopped and looked at the green leaves with profound disgust. Listen to me carefully. Kira, let me tell you the absolute truth about kale. In the old days, when you would go to a decent cafeteria, kale was just that decorative green stuff that they used to keep the ice from touching the bowls of cottage cheese on the buffet line. It is all corporate hype. You do not just go from being a functional garnish to a certified superfood overnight. I feel so incredibly stupid that I actually fell for it for a brief period in college. It is a lie. A loud, aggressive knocking at the front door interrupted her lecture. Someone was pounding on the wood as if they were trying to break it down. Coming, coming, I am coming. Dan's voice boomed from the hallway as he walked out of his bedroom, having returned home briefly to change his shirt. He opened the front door to find a woman standing on the porch. She was wearing a faded denim jacket, had a massive, half-faded tattoo of a man's face on her forearm, and looked completely furious. Hi, how can I help you? Dan asked, his voice guarded. I am looking for Conner-Healy's mother, the woman said, crossing her arms and tapping her foot aggressively against the porch steps. Is she around? She is not home from work yet, Dan said, leaning against the doorframe to block her view of the interior. But I am Harris's grandfather. What exactly can I do for you on this afternoon? Your lovely granddaughter goes to the high school with my son, Kyle, the woman stated, her eyes narrowing. And yesterday afternoon, she sold him a homemade pot cookie during third period. Dan blinked, his face remaining entirely expressionless for 3 long seconds. Okay, he said slowly. I can honestly kind of believe that she sold him pot, because she is a teenager in this town, but I do not believe for one single second that she actually baked anything. The girl does not know how to turn on the oven. Well, you better believe it, the woman snapped, shaking her head. Kyle completely freaked out in the middle of the living room, and I was up all night long trying to reassure him that time wasn't standing still and that his heart wasn't going to explode. It was a nightmare. Yeah, stuff does get on top of you like that sometimes, Dan said, a small, involuntary smirk touching his lips before he quickly wiped it away. Listen, I am really sorry about that. We would never want that kind of experience to happen to any kid in this neighborhood. You tell her mother that I had to take him straight to urgent care because he was hyperventilating, the woman demanded. I am out exactly $200 for the copay, and I need that money right now to pay for my upcoming tattoo removal appointment. Dan looked at her arm. Tattoo removal? Yes, she said, gesturing to the faded face on her forearm. So my brand new husband cannot handle looking at my ex-husband's face while he is behind me on the motorcycle. It is causing marital strife. Your first husband liked looking at his own face while he was back there? Dan asked, genuinely curious. It was a major red flag that I completely ignored at the time, okay? The woman snapped, waving her hand dismissively. Look, are you going to give me the money or what? I am really sorry, lady, but I cannot help you with the $200 right now, Dan said, shaking his head. I simply do not have it on me. Times are tight. All right. Well, maybe I'll just walk into your living room and take something that looks like it is worth $200, she threatened, looking past his shoulder. No. Fine. I will come back when the mother is home from work. She turned to leave just as Darlene walked out the front door, carrying her tote bag. Hey, the woman shouted, pointing a finger at her. Are you Harris Healy's mother? Because if you are, you owe me a significant amount of money for medical bills. Nope, Darlene said without stopping, pushing past her down the steps. Never seen you before in my life. Well, tell her I will be back tomorrow, the woman yelled after her. I will absolutely pass that message along, Darlene called back over her shoulder. You have a truly blessed day. Dan watched the woman storm down the driveway, then turned to Darlene with a look of thunderous anger. What the hell was that all about, Darlene? You heard her, Dan, Darlene said, her voice dropping as she realized Leo and Kira were listening from the kitchen. You got a massive problem on your hands. Your granddaughter is apparently selling pot cookies at the local high school. What? Dan groaned, slamming his hand against the porch railing. How come when I get home from a long day of construction work, it is never because somebody in this family got a college scholarship? Why is it always a drug deal? Where is Harris right now? She is still at the hospital with the rest of the family, Darlene said, checking her watch. Damn, Dan muttered, grabbing his coat. What is wrong now? Did something else happen? They could not stop the labor with the medication, Darlene said softly, her tough exterior cracking for a moment. The baby is coming right now, Dan. We have to go. All right, we got to get going immediately, Dan said, rushing toward his truck. We need to get there before Bev wraps the poor thing in a restaurant napkin and puts it in her purse for real. In the delivery room, the monitors were beeping at a frantic, terrifying pace. Becky was drenched in sweat, her fingers gripping the metal rails of the hospital bed so tightly her knuckles were white. Jackie stood on one side, holding a damp washcloth to her forehead, while Roseanne stood on the other, shouting encouragement. Okay, Becky, just one more massive push, the doctor ordered, positioning himself at the end of the bed. You are almost there. I cannot do it anymore, Roseanne, Becky sobbed, shaking her head. I have nothing left. I am too tired. You absolutely can do this, Roseanne shouted, her voice filling the room with authority. It is a preemie, Becky. It is very small. It is going to slide right out. One more push. Becky let out a primal scream, straining with every ounce of strength she possessed. Oh, my God, she's here, Jackie whispered, tears springing to her eyes as a tiny infant emerged into the doctor's hands. Nurse, call for the team, the doctor said quickly, his tone shifting from encouraging to intensely professional. Is she okay? Becky gasped, trying to sit up. Why isn't she crying, Roseanne? Why is it so quiet in here? You did great, Becky, Roseanne said, her voice unusually gentle as she pushed her daughter back onto the pillows. Just rest for a single second and let them work. Why aren't they putting her directly on my chest? Becky demanded, her voice rising in panic as she watched 3 nurses swarm around a small warming table. Jackie, you said the birth plan required immediate chest contact for the oxytocin surge. Why aren't they doing it? This is exactly what is supposed to happen with a premature birth. Dear, Jackie lied smoothly, though her own hands were shaking as she adjusted the washcloth. They need to stabilize her first. They are going to take her straight to the neonatal intensive care unit, the doctor explained, his back to them as he adjusted a tiny oxygen mask. I want to see her right now, Becky cried, trying to swing her legs out of the bed. Let me see my baby. Just let them do their jobs, Becky, Roseanne commanded, holding her down with a firm but loving grip. It is going to be okay. I promise you. Does she look normal, Roseanne? Becky asked, tears streaming down her face. Tell me the truth. Does she have all her fingers and toes? Yes, she looks absolutely perfect, Roseanne said, looking over at the tiny infant. Then why on earth cannot I see her? Becky whispered, her voice breaking. Because she is very small, Roseanne said, trying to inject some trademark Conner humor into the terrifying moment. She is so tiny she cannot even be